With anime just about as popular as it's ever been before, there's an ever-increasing number of companies and people outside of Japan producing media inspired by anime. It looks like anime, they call it anime in their marketing, but is it really anime? Should Japan do something about this? Should they protect the word anime? Should they make it a regional designation? In other words, if it wasn't produced in Japan, you shouldn't be able to call it anime. This is the stance of Matt Alt. So Matt is an expert on all things Japan, especially Japanese pop culture. He's also the author of the amazing book Pure Invention, How Japan's Pop Culture Conquered the World. I highly recommend this book. So recently I came across a video on his YouTube channel, Matt Alt's Japan. Go subscribe to that. It's a great channel. And it was exactly about this topic. He thinks that Japan needs to step in and make the word anime a regional designation. If it wasn't made in Japan, you shouldn't be able to call it anime. So I wanted to have him on the channel to discuss this even deeper because I love this kind of stuff and he agreed. And so that is what you're going to get to watch today. We talked a little bit about the history of the word anime. What are some of the problems that have popped up with this word recently or with like the people that are using this word, I guess you could say. And of course, why he thinks that it should be made a regional designation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, drop me a like, and let me know in the comments, do you agree with Matt's opinion? Do you think that only productions made in Japan should be able to use the word anime, or do you think that it shouldn't matter where something is made as long as it looks like anime? Let me know in the comments, and of course, don't forget to check out Matt Alt's YouTube channel as well. All the links are down below. All right, so let's get into the conversation. So let's start with a question that seems so obvious, but when you think about it, it may not be so obvious these days. And I think that's the crux of the issue. What is anime? Especially like if you were to ask a Japanese person or like, what is the kind of background that this word came from?
So the word anime was coined in 1963 by a Japanese artist named Osamu Tezuka, who was at the time Japan's biggest manga artist, like huge. He was just the dominant manga artist of the era. And he'd always dreamed of doing animation, and he founded his own animation company called Mushi Productions. And they made several short cartoons, and then they made the Japan's first ever 30-minute or 25, whatever it is with commercial length weekly animated series. It was called Astro Boy, Tetsuan Atomu in Japanese. And it was huge. It was like a giant hit in Japan. It was like the equivalent of Pokemon, like the number of people who tuned into the show rivaled or even exceeded the Olympics of the era. It was crazy. It was just a huge thing. But Tezuka was really aware of how his work, it wasn't that the Japanese had invented animation. He was trying to kind of stake a claim for Japan in this wonderful art form. And he came up with the word anime, which is a contraction of the word animation, as Japanese call animation in Japanese, to refer to Japan-produced animation as opposed to imported. And there was a ton of imported animation at the time coming from all over the place. Like, until Astro Boy debuted, the only regular weekly cartoons on Japanese TV were things like Popeye or the Flintstones. And those were, obviously not Japanese. They're not anime. Except, this is the interesting thing here, right? Most people of the era didn't call these things animation or anime. Animation is a kind of technical term. Most average people in Japan called it terebi manga, which means like TV manga. That was how most kids and adults referred to it. So by coining this word anime, Tezuka was trying to kind of stake a claim on, mark his territory, so to speak. Anime is animation produced in Japan for Japanese audiences. Now, of course, it's much bigger than that, but that was where it started.
That term terebi manga is so interesting because so much of anime is still, in a sense, terebi manga, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's interesting because manga is inseparable from anime in a lot of ways, right? Like all of the 6 of the 10 biggest anime franchises of all time came out of Shonen Jump magazine, which is of course a manga magazine. So you can't really separate the two. Of course, there are original anime, like
Yeah.
Makoto Shinkai's stuff is original. There's a lot of original anime out there,
Hmm.
especially in the 80s and 90s. There was a huge boom for OVAs, which were original video animation, direct to video. Most
Hmm.
of those were not based on comics. Some were, but a lot weren't.
Hmm.
So, but in general, yeah, manga and anime are really connected. And manga's history, obviously, as a word and as a concept, is a lot longer than anime. So when anime came around, they're like, oh, it's like moving manga.
Hmm.
So that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Definitely. Yeah. 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 And of course, how can I put it? Like those early days, Tetsuo Anatom, like Adam, what's the English title? Adam,
Astro Boy,
Astro Boy.
Astro
Thank you.
Boy, come on, man, come on, get with it. Yeah.
Blank for a moment. Blank for a moment. But yeah, so that started in Japan. It took a little while for that stuff to come over to the US, but then of course in the early days it was like heavily like altered and dubbed, and a lot of
Yeah,
people probably
actually, though,
weren't even.
it didn't take a long time. Like Astro Boy aired in the States almost immediately after it did in Japan. There was apparently
Mm,
like a TV, the story goes there was a TV exec visiting Japan for some reason, caught it on TV, and he's like, we need this for NBC or whatever it was.
right.
There's actually a lot of scholarship about this, and I highly recommend looking into it. And there's like Jonathan Clement's History of Anime. There's like a
Yeah.
million books about this. So
Mhm.
forgive me about the little details, but anime or Astro Boy came out very soon after, and that ushered in this mini boom in the 60s for Japanese animation that wasn't ever explicitly described as Japanese animation. This is the
Right.
big thing, right?
That was what I was trying to get at, where like
Yeah.
back then, people outside of Japan, well, we're mainly talking about the US, I guess, but people were consuming that without really having
Yeah.
an awareness that this was coming from Japan, right? So the word anime
Yeah.
wasn't really like relevant at all. It wasn't a thing yet.
Right. No, definitely not. Definitely
Mhm.
not. And like smart folks got it.
Mhm.
It's interestingly, Tezuka almost immediately after Astro Boy started airing abroad, got a letter from Stanley Kubrick.
Mhm.
Stanley Kubrick saw Astro Boy and is like, wow, this is really cool. I like your sense of the future. Do you want to collaborate on a script I'm working on? And there's some debate as to whether that script was for 2001: A Space Odyssey or the script that became AI, which makes a lot
Mm.
more sense
Yeah.
because Astro Boy is really a lot like the Spielberg movie, Spielberg/Kubrick movie AI. But so like tastemakers were already noticing this. Whether kids were noticing that it's from Japan, they probably noticed it was different. But as far as the TV stations were concerned, the only thing they cared about was it was cheaper. It was
Hmm.
cheaper than the syndication rights to Flintstones or the Jetsons or whatever. That was all they cared about, which is why you saw these things airing on a lot of regional and not cable access. What do you call like UHF stations, public
Sure.
TV, that sort of thing. So you had Astro Boy, you had Gigantor, which is like the first giant robot show in Japan. It's Tetsujin 28 in Japanese. There were other Tezuka ones that tried to bring out Princess Knight, which is a very kind of forward-looking story about a girl who dresses like a boy to fight in this war to protect her kingdom. Kimba the White Lion, all sorts of other anime came out around that time, but they weren't known as anime, just like you said. And they kind of hid the fact that they were Japanese. And that went on for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we get into like the 80s and 90s, and that's when we do get the word anime, I guess, in the West, but we also get the
Yes.
word Japanime, right?
Japanimation. So
Yeah.
that story, that's like, so in the 70s, there
Yeah.
started to be like this kind of, in the early 80s, there were all of these, what you might call early adopters, nerds
Yeah.
who really love Japanese anime. They tended to be on the coasts because a lot of, there were more TV stations that showed this stuff there. And Hawaii, like there was a ton of
Yeah.
anime
I'm
being
here
broadcast in
in
Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah, there you go, right?
Yeah.
So like, and I'm so jealous of that. But so Japanimation was the term that Western fans coined to distinguish it. It's like the anime of like they coined it for the exact same reasons. This stuff is different.
Yeah.
Let's recognize it by a different name. And so Japanimation was when I was growing up, that was Robotech. That was Star Blazers. It was, and even that old stuff when you would see it again was Japanimation. That's what you called it. But it's kind of a problematic term. It has Jap in the beginning, and obviously
Yes.
they didn't coin it for that reation. These aren't racists or
Yeah. The
nationalists or anything like
portmanteau, it's
that.
just,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And it
Yeah.
made sense. Japan,
Yeah.
nation, like it made sense. But,
Yeah.
it was kind of a little bit problematic. And so I think it was in the 90s, really, when the word anime, we knew about anime even in the 80s growing up. We knew that
Hmm.
Japanese called animation anime. And, I think we should also take a moment here to note that Japanese people aren't nearly as picky and specific about this as Western fans are.
Hmm.
Um, Anime is used to refer to like a really broad variety of things in Japan.
Hmm.
Once
Hmm.
anime took off as a term, and it didn't take off in Japan among average people until like the 70s.
Hmm.
Once it did, it started being applied to anything.
Hmm.
Like I don't think Japanese when people use it, like they use it very loosely, but then when you're drilling down into it, they'll get more specific.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
Japanese people aren't as fussy about this as Westerners are actually. And
Yeah.
that's actually part of the reason I wrote that piece, which is like, I think you need to be more fussy about this. I think there's a chance to be more fussy about this.
Absolutely. And so I think after that age, after we maybe like once we get into the 2000s, now we get into the era that your article and your video starts to more directly refer to,
Right.
where it starts to blow up to the point where it used to be in the US and in the West, in the English speaking world, anime meant something that came, animation that came from Japan. That's what
Yeah.
it is. And that was practically like a point of pride. It's like, no, I'm not watching those American cartoons. I'm watching
Right.
Akira. I'm watching Ghost in the Shell. That stuff is from
Yeah. Yeah.
Japan. This is underground. This is kind
Anime.
of cool, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
kind of adult. But
Yes.
now it's gotten to the point where it's just so mainstream and it's so pervasive that
Yes.
it begs the question, like, what is the I
Well,
think both of us have an understanding what anime is, but what does the common person in the English speaking world think anime is? I don't know anymore.
yeah, it's tough because so many people, like for a long time, average people thought anime meant porn
Mhm.
because there
Yeah.
were so many like erotic anime coming out in the 90s and early
Mhm.
2000s. Then a lot of them associate it with like kind of like super nerdy people, like whatever. To me, the history here is that anime was like pretty much a subculture until Pokemon hit in the late
Mm.
90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
That introduced like this entire millennial generation to anime as something that wasn't exotic, but something that was very close to them. And then the millennials, as they grew up, naturally, a portion of them became artists themselves and started incorporating these the tropes, the styles and things into their own work. And so now in the States, you see, and that actually was starting even before the millennials, that like Gen Xers, like early adopting Gen X fans, and I have friends who went into Hollywood animation, were adopting and transforming kind of anime techniques for use in America even before that. So there was kind of a like a platform, a trend for it, but it really blew up in recent years. So now you see like anime it's difficult for me to imagine anybody working in the American animation world who wasn't raised on anime or isn't aware of it in some way. Like,
Hmm.
and like that goes even like to boomers. You have people like the John Lasseter, who is the co-founder of Pixar, saying Pixar wouldn't exist without Miyazaki, right? Now,
Hmm.
Pixar doesn't look like anime, but you can see there's an influence there. And then you have things where the influence is very obvious, like Across the Spider-Verse, the Spider-Man movies. The director of those films is very upfront about saying, "Oh, I love anime and I wanted to incorporate anime style into my work." And the style isn't always like just it looks like anime. There's all sorts of things that differentiate anime style, like static poses, the lighting, the framing, the blocking of scenes. So there's like more subtle stuff than just like, oh, they have big eyes, or something like that.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of that influence now. You see, Blue-Eyed Samurai,
Yeah.
you know,
Huge. Yeah.
yeah, and like great, awesome. I think that's really awesome that people are influenced by anime and doing their own thing. But
Hmm.
it's really the thing that sparked me to write my piece on the Pure Invention newsletter wasn't so much things like Blue-Eyed Samurai or Spider-Man or anything like that. It's this kind of there's a boom right now especially in the game world, like the
Yep.
mobile game world. There is a ton of product coming out mainly of Asia, but not exclusively, that is just complete full on looks like it came out of Japan, and is being marketed as anime, but is not. And I actually don't have a major problem with this either. There's nothing illegal or wrong about that. And they've
Hmm.
definitely borrowed the style and they're homaging it. They do it out of love and respect. But it got me thinking, like, if everybody starts calling their stuff anime, what's anime anymore, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, like just literally yesterday or no, 2 days ago, I was outside here in Honolulu, and somebody had a car wrapped in Genshin Impact.
Yeah. Genshin is like the real, like there had been companies and games that had tried to
Yeah.
adopt anime style before that, but Genshin was the big breakthrough. I mean, and it's a huge breakthrough. Like it made like
Yeah.
$9 billion in 4 years. It's insane. It's like printing money.
Yeah.
And they're really interesting. I'm actually fascinated by that company. Like they tried early on and failed many times before they hit on the kind of master mix, whatever you want to call it, of gameplay and anime style and tone and all of that stuff that made Genshin what it is.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
when I say like, when I'm making arguments that, the Japanese government should consider making anime a protected regional designation, it's not because I think like Genshin sucks or like any of these people are doing anything wrong.
Mhm.
Back before champagne was a designation for sparkling wine, you had all sorts of people all over the world making probably some very delicious sparkling wines and calling it champagne style or champagne inspired. But the French decided to crack down on that to say, no, this is an actual cultural thing.
Mhm.
And I think there is room to discuss this.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
not like, I don't have any power in the Japanese government to make this happen.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's just something I'm suggesting because now that anime has become so widespread, like you said, it's in danger, I think, of getting used so much that it starts to lose what its original meaning was, which was, I think, for you, the same as me, right? Stuff that
Yeah.
came out of Japan, right?
Right,
Right?
right, exactly. Like when I hear anime to me, and granted, I speak Japanese and I've lived there and blah blah blah, but to me, that's what I expect, right? If somebody tells me like, "Oh, here's an anime that you should check out," and go like, "Wait, this wasn't produced in Japan." Like, if that were to happen, now I wouldn't automatically assume, "Oh, this must be bad," but
Right.
my expectations would not be met when somebody uses the word anime if in that situation,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
but that's
Yes.
that's
And
me, and I know that's not necessarily everyone, but as you say, like if everything is anime, then what's anime? Right?
well, I would actually, and to drill down
Yeah.
even a little bit more specifically, I
Mhm.
don't think it's connected to race or
Mhm.
ethnicity or anything like that. There's
Exactly.
actually
Yeah.
a lot of foreign people here
Mhm.
working in the anime industry, but
There's
that's
manga
key.
artists too. There's
Yeah, manga
people
artists
from
too, manga
outside of
artists too.
Japan that are actually
And
publishing in Japan. Yeah.
And if those, I'm just making this up, I don't have
Mhm.
any examples, but
Yeah.
let's just say some of those people working in the manga and anime industry in Japan push the envelope of style and create something totally new, I would still consider that Japanese anime or Japanese manga. The
Mhm.
reason why is because I believe anime and manga are the reason they're anime and manga is because of the terrain, which is the landscape, the cultural landscape of Japan. Just like champagne is the product of grapes that are grown in this very specific region and harvested in this very specific way, I think anime and manga are products of this specific region and they're harvested in their specific way too, which is to say they are nourished through systems in Japan that are unique to Japan. Like you could copy them abroad, but 99% of the time when I see people saying, oh, we're anime abroad, they're not copying those systems. They're just copying the aesthetics or maybe some of the storytelling tools. To me, like those aesthetics and those storytelling styles are also rooted in a really, really specific business model here in Japan. And without that business model, and when I say business model, I'm not just talking marketing. I'm talking about the way you make manga, the way you make anime within the system of Japan. That is the interesting thing to me. That is what I study.
Mhm.
That is what, so I'm biased, I guess you can say.
Mhm.
Like anime, like the uniqueness of that is what drew me to anime and then in turn to Japan. So I would hate to see that get so watered down that suddenly anime equals cartoon and it's just not a designation anymore. You know?
Right, right. No, I totally see that perspective, and as a person who, like, how can I put it? Like you said, it's the way that it's made, but also the creators. Whether you are not born in Japan or born in Japan, like if you have spent time in Japan, you have an understanding of Japan, and then you decide, oh, I want to become a manga creator, this and that. You have an understanding of how society is. You might want to base it in a high school or this and that. There's a lot of cultural things that go into it that inform the way the story is told, the
Yeah,
references that are made, the jokes that are made. Sometimes those jokes don't land outside of Japan, but all
sure.
this stuff give anime or manga the flavor that it
Yeah,
has that make it its own unique product, even though, yeah, it has origins from, Tezuka being influenced
totally,
by
totally.
outside
And
and all
it's
this, but everything does, right?
Well, of course, it's like if you were so inspired by Studio Ghibli that you want to
Yeah.
become an animator, and then you even want to make a Ghibli kind of inspired thing, more power to you. But it's not going to be Studio Ghibli anime.
Mm-hmm,
It's
hmm.
not like unless you are having like you're getting whacked on the head with like a ruler by Miyazaki Hayao, while you're making this thing, you're working like these 90-hour weeks in the Japanese way. I just don't see that it is anime. Like if you're not making it inside Japan and inside the system. Similarly, like I know there's so many people out there who are inspired by like Dragon Ball, but Dragon Ball was the result of a really specific process at
Hmm.
Shueisha Shonen Jump magazine. It's almost like hazing. The editor
It is.
made,
Toriyama on the
yeah,
verge of death, basically.
yeah. And like, the editor, Torishima, he famously made Toriyama draw 500 different perspective openings to Dr. Slump before he accepted it. And it's this kind of stoic, Spartan, um, very master and apprentice style thing. And then once like Dr. Slump or Dragon Ball started, you're still on the hook. Like they have this constant surveying system of their readers. The minute you start dropping in the rankings, you have to change to suit that. So like you have this feedback system too. And these things like the apprenticeship system, the training, and most importantly, that feedback loop are things that just don't really exist in the American system. Or the Western, the bande dessinée. There's awesome graphic novels all over the world. There's awesome
Hmm.
artists all over the world, and make whatever you want. But I'm just saying, to me, if it's not made within that Japanese system, and I don't care what your ethnicity is, I don't care what your background is, if you're not working in the Japanese system, you aren't making manga or anime. You're making something at best inspired by it.
Right, right. And that doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It's just it is what
Right.
it is, right? And that's
Right,
yeah,
right. I love this. I love the Spider-Man animated
yeah,
films. I
yeah.
I, I think they're great. I haven't seen Blue-Eyed Samurai, but I hear it's really good. I
Yeah.
believe it. I totally do.
Hmm.
But neither one of those people was saying we made anime. That's
Hmm.
actually really key too.
That's true.
They're actually not saying that. It's
Hmm.
more to me. And actually, this is something I also want to drill down on. This is less a problem with creators than it is with lazy marketers and
Hmm.
lazy corporations that
Hmm.
are trying to basically steal the prestige
Hmm.
of what Japanese built.
Hmm.
99% of the time, the creators are so in awe of Japan, they wouldn't even dream of calling themselves like Ghibli animation or anime even.
Hmm.
They know how different it is. But it's the marketers, all of those people who are basically, and there's nothing stopping them from doing this, saying it's anime.
Hmm.
And then the news picks it up because they're not anime experts. And so you see all of this. There was a crazy article in I think, was it Bloomberg? I have to look it up.
Hmm.
But it's saying one of those mobile anime inspired games is teaching the world about the potential of anime. And I'm thinking to myself, what, as
Huh?
opposed to like 70 years or whatever it is of Japanese people doing it? Why is a Korean, cartoon game,
Hmm.
anime style game teaching the world about anime? That doesn't make any sense. No offense
Hmm.
to the Koreans. I mean,
Yeah.
Koreans, Chinese, Southeast Asians. They've long been the sort outsourcing for anime for a long
Hmm.
time. So there's a huge amount of awesome talent there.
Yeah.
But is it anime? That's the
Right.
question. That's the question we're asking.
Right. Right. And it's like there's so much that we I can dig into right here. But like for example, what anime has become now, like people have a certain image of anime, and it's not Dragon Ball. Like for example, if I were to copy the Goku Dragon Ball style, people would think
Yeah.
Toriyama because he has such a distinctive style.
Right.
It's
Well,
not these
he's like, he's the thing.
right, right. But there's or like Sazae-san or Doraemon or
Sure.
like these other shows that don't fall under the what the Western fans think of what the generic anime model is, but that style has come to have its own like feelings associated with it, right? It's like, oh,
Sure.
coolness, adventure, and it's this shorthand for like you just see a picture and you go, oh, I can expect this or that or this or that. And so it does end up being a convenient marketing tool. And we're not saying that everybody does it, but there are some projects, some games or whatever that will purposely, shoot for that
Sure.
just in order to get a product that will sell. And that's business. That's how
Yeah,
things
yeah, yeah. No,
go,
totally, totally. I get
Yeah.
it. Like,
Mhm.
nobody's breaking the law. Nobody's
Mhm.
breaking. I'm not
Yeah.
saying like throw these people in the gulag.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
just saying, Japan is now not just supporting anime, they're
Yeah.
counting on anime as an
Yes.
economic strategy going forward
Hmm.
because for many reasons we could get into, but they really are, and they're looking to make this literally an economic pillar
Hmm. Hmm.
of their growth and sustaining their energy going forward. If that's the case, if they're serious about that, they need to be more serious about curating what anime is. Because again, if everything's champagne, then why the heck would you pay a premium for stuff that happens to be grown in the Champagne region of France? You wouldn't. You do now because it's become a prestige thing. And I think anime deserves that prestige. I think
Yeah.
manga deserves this prestige. This isn't about shutting down creators or shutting out other ones outside. It's about recognizing and giving prestige to the people who originated the style, to the country that originated the style, to the style itself. And I think most of the creators who love anime would agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. It comes down to a kind of marketing, simple packaging. It's like, for example, you see anime with a capital A, you know this is something that was produced in Japan. Now, does it guarantee it'll be like the most awesome thing ever? No,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
at least you have that extra information. And
Yes.
then if something was with a lowercase a, for example, then that might be okay. This
Right.
has that anime aesthetic, but it wasn't produced in Japan. And it's up to the consumer then to make their own decisions about each
Yeah, yeah,
product.
totally, totally.
But that
And
is
there's
valuable
precedent.
information, I think.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
definitely it's almost like labeling what's in your foods. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And
Yeah, yeah.
there's precedent for it too. There's
Mm.
like Champagne is the most famous regional designation,
Mhm.
official regional designation. But there's others for things that aren't foods, like Harris Tweed out of England is another one.
Mhm.
Darjeeling tea. Well, actually, that is a food, but there's other. I think there's other kinds of like textiles and stuff from
I think you
India
mentioned
that
glass too, right?
glass, yeah, Murano
Yeah.
glass, Italian, Venetian
Mhm.
glass. There's
Mhm.
all sorts of things like that. Swiss watches.
Yeah.
Swiss watch. You can't like make like a Swiss style watch in, Brooklyn and sell it as a Swiss watch.
Mhm. Mhm.
You might be able to give it like a fake Swiss sounding name. Like how the ice cream, American ice cream Haagen-Dazs sounds
Yeah, yeah.
like, it's like it sounds like it's out of, I don't know, Denmark or something, but it's
Yeah.
not. Like it's not even they didn't even copy a name. They made it up. But you can't call it like fine European ice cream. It's not. It's made like Hoboken or something. So it's like, and it's fine. Like I like Haagen-Dazs. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
I
good.
eat Haagen-Dazs ice cream. But like, truth in advertising, people.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. No,
It's tough because anime is so many different things to different people,
it
and
is.
anime is also an identity to many of the people who consume it. So they take this very, very personally. I don't mean it personally.
Yeah, it
I
is.
mean it in
And
love.
I mean, we've said it multiple times, but it's not about whether something is good or bad. It's about understanding where something was made and, perhaps the cultural and societal background that informed it, what you
Yeah.
can expect from a certain product. And let's face it, like Japan needs this aspect to their
Yes,
economy,
they
right?
need it.
They really,
They
really need
do.
it.
They really, really need it. It's not like Japan is dying or in danger
Yeah,
of like, anything like that. But, the birth rate's been declining a long
yeah.
time. And there's this phrase that's getting popularized in Japan right now that I'm looking to kind of explore in later
Hmm.
versions of video essays on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It's called the 80% Society.
Hmm.
Japan is only going to be 80% of what it was. They're only going to have 80% of the people, only 80% of the young people within that 80%. You know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
it's 80% all the way down. You're never going to be, everybody always wants to be more, more, more. Japan is one of the first countries to come to grips that they're going to be less, less, less.
Hmm.
And traditionally, when you have an aging society and you have a smaller workforce, you are much less influential on the world stage. But Japan is unique that their culture is so influential on the global stage, even though they're one of the most aged societies out there. They're shrinking, et cetera, et cetera. And if they want to maintain that, they need to do everything they can to emphasize the uniqueness and prestige of the content that they're making. And that's what I'm suggesting.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah. So if you're interested in more content like this, of course, well, first of all, you can check out Matt's book, Pure
Thank you. Yes,
Invention.
please. Please.
So Pure
Please do.
Invention,
Yes.
link down below. I've read the book. It's awesome. I had him on the
Thank
Japan
you.
Station podcast. We talked about it for an hour. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. There's the blog, right? Where can you find, what's the address for that?
Blog.pureinventionbook.com. That's going to be down in the description too.
Yep.
And
And
then
of course, the
that's
YouTube channel. Go
yes.
subscribe to Matt's YouTube channel. That's how I found out he was talking about about this. It's a
Yeah.
great
Like and
channel.
subscribe. Like and
Subscribe.
subscribe.
Go do that. Go do that. Link down below. He's releasing videos maybe even more often than I do. So go check that out.
Yeah, I'm aiming for weekly. I'm aiming for like
Yeah.
I was aiming for bi-weekly, but I think weekly
It's
is
tough.
more
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
tough. I try to do an essay and a video every week, but
Yeah.
it's life intervenes. You know how
Absolutely.
it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. But
So
Japan stuff,
please,
Japan pop culture stuff, anime stuff, all on the YouTube channel. Go Matt Alt Japan, and the link is down below. So go subscribe, please. Go do that. Uh,
please, thank you,
Matt, thank you so much. It was great talking to you, and I'm gonna keep watching your stuff. So again, Matt Alt Japan, go
thank
do
you. No, me
it.
too.
Bye.
Please, no, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
It's always fun. It's always awesome to talk. Thanks.